I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the TechCentral Show, brought to you by MTN Business. Subscribe if you haven't already done so on youtube.com/TechCentral, or sign up for our daily newsletter. We'll get the latest and best local and international tech news delivered to your inbox before sunrise each morning. You can do that at techcentral.co.za/newsletter. Now, my next guest is in Dubai today. I believe that's where he is based. Frédéric Schepens, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Fred, is Chief Executive at a company called Bayobab. You may not have heard of Bayobab before, but that's because the company has a new name. They were previously known as MTN GlobalConnect, and a few weeks ago announced the change of name to Bayobab. Fred, welcome. Why the name change?
Well, it's a great question. Thanks very much, Duncan, for having us. Bayobab is a leading Pan-African wholesale and infrastructure service providers, and we changed the name in order to reflect our African roots. We're in a tremendous amount of countries on the African continent, but also we wanted to have a view and also an enablement across the African continent from an angle where we are open access, where we are neutral, and where we actually mirroring the Bayobab tree. And the Bayobab tree is an ecosystem, as we all know, in Africa, which helps and nurture quite a lot of the natural elements and ecosystem in Africa. And we are mirroring that with our infrastructure, our digital infrastructure, which we are rolling out in the continent. So we are like to be the gateway to Africa and creating a one-stop shop for everybody on this globe to do in a more efficient, better way business with us. With everybody who's in Africa, and also we are the gateway to the MTN community. I mean, we have around 280, 290 million subscriber business on the African continent. So we've been not only the gateway for that, let's say, internal, fabric, but also for everybody else in Africa. And this is why we also changed the name into something which is more typical as us Africans across the board.
Sure. Okay. And I mean, previously the name was MTN GlobalConnect. Was there a need to distance yourself somewhat from the MTN brand to be seen as independent of MTN and perhaps more of an independent company able to provide services to other telecommunications operators?
Yes, Duncan, you have to understand that 2 years ago, we took the strategic decision in our Ambition 2025 to structurally separate all the fiber assets from our mobile operators. And we're in progress of doing that with about 7 countries as we speak. So the structural separation of this proprietary network, actually, we built all of that network for ourselves to keep it for us. And now we are transferring that to the local Bayobab fiber coast. And in order to open that up to everybody in country, but also in order to leverage that also from a country-to-country perspective across the continent. And it's quite important for us in order to do so that we not only create more value for our operations, but also making sure that we digitally well deploy our network across the board. And I think we still believe and firmly believe at MTN Group and at Bayobab Group that everybody deserves a digital connected life. And we are continuing that quest by making sure that we open up our network to everybody, but also massively expanding that network in a laser focused way, because we've got around 107,000 kilometers of proprietary fiber, which we are opening up, which we are scaling up. And by 2025, we want to extend that to almost 135,000 kilometers of fiber, which is quite a work in progress, I must say.
Yeah. So fiber is obviously a huge asset of Bayobab's. You have investments in undersea cables, terrestrial fiber as well. But maybe give us a picture of your total asset base. What do you own? Where is it? And what is it used for?
Well, Duncan, we started around 4 to 5 years ago in setting up Bayobab, formerly known as MTN GlobalConnect. And we started with submarine cable systems. We had about 10 submarine cables where we had some good investment in. I mean, we were in most of them actually the largest owner, which we call the arteries around Africa. And we started to start sweating and also bringing it to third parties and expanding this build out towards third parties, where we started contracting the big hyperscalers, like we call them, the names of Facebook, now Meta, Google, Microsoft, etc., in order also to start utilizing these major investments we've done. So we started with a very small team in running that. And then we saw a big need for expanding that also from a terrestrial perspective and rolling out additional fiber infrastructure on the African continent. By doing so, we also strategically took the decision, like I mentioned, at Group Board, at Group Exco, to structurally separate whatever we have, to have it in a more concise, consolidated way under one entity, which is Bayobab, in order to continue having this specialized focus of building out the wet segment, like we call it, the submarine cable infrastructure, but also the dry segments, which is everything which is in the ground on a terrestrial perspective. Now, besides that, also, we looked in how we can consolidate a lot of our platforms from a mobility perspective. You know, Duncan, we are carrying almost 300 million subscriber business over our platforms. And our platforms are very important to the continent as well as to MTN, because we're doing all the roaming through these state-of-the-art platforms for all our subscribers. We do all the voice business, so every international call coming in and out of our network of MTN is growing through Bayobab. The same as with the messaging, international messages, all the SMSs, application to person to person, etc., is going through the Bayobab platforms, as well as the signaling, as well as the cloud numbering, as well as a lot of the other, let's say, services we are carrying from an international perspective, and also enable the national operators in country, and also having a relationship with the MTN group in a very concise, consolidated way. Before, we existed as Bayobab, it was quite complex. To give you an example, from an AT&T perspective, to deal with the African operators, especially with MTN on all levels, if you talk about capacity, if you're talking about roaming, if you're talking about messaging, because we had so many entities and we had to have so many contracts, and we had to have so many, let's say, technical setups, for instance, with AT&T. Well, now through Bayobab, we consolidated everything through our platform. We made it easy to interact, increased dramatically the quality of services, not only for our own operations, but also for the third parties and the partners we're working very closely with. And you have to understand, we have more than 1,000 partners across the globe. And then you talk about the Europeans, the Asians, the Americans, and of course, everybody in Africa we are doing business with are very happy to do it in a consolidated way. It drives efficiencies, it drives quality, and also gives also better prices on all levels for us and for them also, because you can bring the scale of the volumes across the board. So all in all, I think it's a great change in a positive sense.
Is Bayobab 100% owned by MTN Group currently, or are there other shareholders as well?
Yes, so Bayobab, in terms of their shareholding structure, is still 100% owned by MTN Group. We did recently a few transactions on very dedicated and very important projects. It's called the East to West Coast project. I can explain. But today we are a standalone company. We started, like I said, 5 years ago. We've been actually self-funded from the start. So I'm very proud of what we've achieved with the team. And we built it out, this massive network, consolidated that massive network, built all the platform in a self-funded, no debt type of ratio setup. And yes, at the end, we're looking also to continue that growth journey. And of course, we're looking to having the adequate partners in order to continue that growth journey.
Now you're based in Dubai. Bayobab, I take it, is headquartered in Dubai. Is that because it's easier to serve the various African markets that you need to serve from there rather than, say, from Johannesburg?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's a pertinent question which I received quite often, and there's some very good reasons. We're an African company. Majority of our work and our people are in Africa. Our platforms also are built and being managed in Africa. One of the key reasons where we had a network operating center before in India, in Asia, I deliberately pulled it back to the African continent. So we insourced actually all of these activities or network operating centers on the continent. One of the main reasons for that was that we do think that there is a lot of talent in Africa, on the African continent. We wanted, of course, to stimulate that talent pool, that growth in Africa. So that's why we moved. There were about 150 people in India. We recruited new people in Ghana and in Kenya. We've got about 50 people in Ghana and about 40 people now in Kenya. Driving this success centers, like we call it. So in order to manage our network operating centers from these crucial, let's say, platforms and countries. But the reason why we are in Dubai, because we did an in-depth survey also where we would be able to serve our customers, and our customers are actually worldwide. We've got our internal customers, which is, of course, the MTN Group, with all their operating companies in about 18 countries on the African continent. We also have all our other customers in Africa, and also we've got, of course, all our customers in Asia, in the US, in Europe, etc. So from a topology perspective, the most and direct flights are actually from Dubai. And we had already a big base in Dubai. Our MENA office was here because we had a lot of operations before, which we offloaded recently in the Middle East. So we are not an African company, but also a Middle Eastern company previously. So we had a base here, a very good infrastructure, which we tapped upon. But primarily is just from a practical aspect in order to have direct access to most of our operations, to our customers, and also having a good base in managing all of that from a talent pool perspective, where the environment is actually very conducive here in Dubai. 2/3 of our people are in Africa, and we will continue to drive that and grow it rapidly on the African continent for sure.
Does Africa remain your sole focus, or are there opportunities for this company to perhaps expand its operations? I mean, you're in Dubai, perhaps into the Middle East, perhaps even pushing into Europe?
You know, it's a fair question, Duncan. We are really the specialist of Africa. We're an African company, run majorly in Africa. That's our focus. That's our specialization. We partner with people who are very good in what they are doing in various other continents. We don't have any, let's say, strategic assumptions in order to go somewhere else. There's so many things we still need to do in Africa. We barely scratched the surface in most of the countries. I think there's a lot of focus needed, and our focus is Africa all the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The reason I was asking was I see you have extensive experience working in European telecommunications. You've held senior roles at Vodafone Group, including head of global voice services. You've launched various businesses, including mobile operators in Europe. I think it's fair to say you have telecoms in your blood, Fred. But you say this is an African venture. You're not going to be drawing on your roots in European telecoms to expand into that market.
No, and with all the respect, I mean, I worked with a lot of pleasure in my previous companies. But what attracted me so well in being part of Bayobab and MTN is the belief to change for the better good things. And that's sometimes an aspect you might be missing in big corporations. And I think that's something we really live and breathe within the Bayobab group, within MTN. And that's really a game changer. And this is also why we've got also very, very top-notch, talented people in our team who are driving that with the belief not only to do a better good, but also to engage and to be a game changer on that continent.
Yeah.
Which we call home.
Let's talk a bit about. Let's talk a little bit about undersea cables. You're a big investor in those. Did you say you invested in 10 cables around Africa?
Yeah. So today we've got actually investment in 16 cables. To be precise, 16, yes. So and soon 17 also next year. But to give you a bit of an aspect there, so you got 4 or 5 big arteries around Africa. Now these arteries are actually feeding, I would almost say 95% of all the internet traffic going back and forward in Africa to the rest of the continents in the world. It goes mainly to Europe, Asia, and the US. Where we pair with all the important parties in order to have a proper internet access. Now, what we're trying to do at Bayobab is to keep as much as possible now within the continent. This is why we were one of the initiating parties to build new submarine cables, and the True Africa submarine cable was actually designed together with Facebook. And then later on, a lot of other parties, a lot of the telcos participated in that massive project where we are building as we speak and landing as we speak that cable. There are other cables we are also participating in on the East Coast with Google on the Equiano cable. So all of that is giving the badly needed additional oxygen through our arteries, the submarine cables towards the rest of the world. Now, very crucial to that also, and that's what we see, because we see the data explosion still ongoing and ongoing in the coming decades in Africa. There's 2 main reasons for that. First of all, I think the economical growth in Africa is substantial, and also the demographic growth is something which you don't see anywhere else in the world. So you see a stagnation from a demographic view in most of the other continents, except for Asia, where there is a slight growth. In Africa, you still see a massive growth. So the 1.2 or 1.5 billion inhabitants in Africa is actually almost doubling in the coming decades. So that's quite an important game changer. So in order to have enough digital highways and in order to have enough connectivity, there is still a lot of things we need to do. And the submarine cable systems are a crucial part of that equation. I think the second thing we're building also, besides stitching all our networks country by country to each other, we're expanding also from an East Coast to a West Coast a lot of the fiber, which we call the fiber highways. And we're putting terabytes of capacity in the ground as we speak, and 3 various links, potentially a 4th link, which we're going to bring up also, making sure that we bring the latency also down, because you have to understand that now everything goes from for instance, from Ghana all the way back to South Africa, all the way back to the other side, to Europe, if there's a cable cut between Ghana and Europe, for instance. And the other way around also. So everything will have to loop around Africa, or upwards or downwards, which gives quite a bit of latency in terms of an IP traffic or an internet connectivity. So in order to really bridge that, I think crossing the continent and in a cost-efficient way is super important. So hence we are building all of this infrastructure, not only from a latency perspective, but also to make sure that we get more resiliency in our network, which is already top-notch and very strong. But in order to gauge also for the future growth we're going to see on the continents, and which we are seeing as we speak already the last couple of years, and is accelerating day in, day out. So all of that is part of our wider strategic plan, our ambition. And this is also why we are bringing, also coming back to your question on who would be the shareholders. Also, in certain specific projects, we are asking partners to help us, not only from an equity injection perspective or a debt perspective, but also from a relationship perspective with various governments, with various institutions, which is crucial to this ecosystem. And as Bayobab is reflecting the Bayobab natural ecosystem, We're doing it from a digital perspective. It's all part of our rollout.
Take us through your capital spending plans over the next couple of years, to the extent that you can reveal numbers. And where is that CapEx investment going to be directed specifically? I presume there are some big projects that are planned for the next 1 to 3 years. Perhaps you can give us some insight into where that spending is going to go.
Yeah. No, we announced a couple of years ago that we would spend about $500 million in the coming 5 years. So we are well on our way in that spend to complete that in 2025. That spend is various major works we are doing from an integration perspective, from a network rollout perspective, from a platform perspective, also across our markets. I have to say 99% or 95% of all that spent is in Africa. For Africa, we are doing it partially self-funded, partially through partners. Until today, we self-funded everything, and we will continue to do that. Now, one of the big tickets, of course, like I mentioned, is the East Coast to West Coast. If you look at these fiber highways, it goes up to $320 million, which is beyond the 2025 time frame. So you need to see it in a phased approach. So a portion will be put into that aspect. A portion will be put into various in-country deployments across Africa. A big portion also will be put into the submarine cable systems. If you look into to Africa total tickets, although there are no official figures, but you can imagine putting the longest cable on Earth in the sea, over 44,000 kilometers of fiber in the sea, is a major investment, not only by Bayobab, but also by the rest of the consortium led by Facebook or Meta. So all of that is part of the equation in order to continue our capital expenditures in the coming years.
The scale of some of these investments that we see in undersea cables is quite astonishing. It's an area of focus in the tech industry that absolutely fascinates me, and the amount of work and planning that goes into building these systems is absolutely phenomenal. The model, though, has changed quite a bit over the last few decades, hasn't it? I mean, historically, these submarine cables which historically, compared certainly to today's capacities, were tiny in terms of what you could do with them. But historically, these have been built by consortiums of telecommunications operators. But we're seeing other investors coming in now. I mean, Seacom built a cable along the East Coast in 2009. I think it was 2009. And more recently, we've seen some of the giants of Silicon Valley starting to invest in these cables. You mentioned Google and Equiano and Meta and To Africa. What is your thought about these big Silicon Valley tech giants getting involved in this industry that has historically been the domain of telecommunications operators? Is it a good thing, and are they bringing something different to the table?
No, it's absolutely very good for us. I mean, you have to understand that these OTT, which we were calling them, which is over the top, we call them now hyperscalers, and for some good reasons. The Microsofts of today, the Amazons, the Metas, Facebook, Google, are investing now also heavily in infrastructure. And they did see that just going over the top and running over fixed or mobile networks is not enough. I mean, the scale, the explosion in data is something where they also bring their little bits into the equation from a capital expenditure. And I think it's great news for all of us on all levels. So on that perspective, it's good. I mean, To Africa is something which was originally brought to the table by Facebook Meta, where we were one of the first initiators also to participate into that. And the model changed quite a bit. Before, when you set up a consortium, you were dealing with MEO kilometers. So everybody got a bunch of MEO kilometers which you could allocate to each other and connect actually to each other in order to get the needed capacity. Now, the new cables are different in nature, where we got actually the physical fiber pairs. So we as Bayobab are managing a fiber pair, which we own on the East Coast and on the West Coast, which is actually a total game changer of ownership, of how you run a network and how you deploy a network also. So the consortium is still there for some practical things, but we as TechCo, or telecommunication infrastructure provider, we're physically also managing that equipment and these fiber pairs, if it's not dry in the ground or in the sea in the wet segments, which is quite a game changer. So all in all, yes, it's very good news. We're very happy that these hyperscalers are now also walking the talk in terms of investments in order to grow the infrastructure across the globe.
The To Africa and Equiano cables, and there are others as well. We're not mentioning, there's ACE, which I think MTN and Bayobab now is a big investor in, and there are others. Do you think that we have enough capacity around the African continent now? I mean, some people have even suggested that what could be going on around Africa now could be a little like what we saw across the North Atlantic around the late 1990s in the dot-com bubble, when there was huge overinvestment in subsea capacity in the transatlantic routes. Do you think there's a risk that there's too much investment going on in subsea and the wet capacity around Africa?
So no, it's a good question. From a Bayobab perspective, I don't think there's enough capacity, and we still continue to do expansions of the current capacity and upgrades. So, I mean, even the older cables like WAX or ACE are being EIG, Easy are being upgraded a couple of times in their lifespan, and the reason is actually to cater for the growth we are seeing. I must say that we are thinking already in confidence. I mean, now it's not that confidential anymore, to see on how we potentially would even build the next cable in the coming years from a submarine cable system infrastructure, because we're going to see in 5 to 10 years' time already potentially an issue of a need for that. One of the main reasons why I'm actually building also this Pan-African digital infrastructure is to keep as much as possible in Africa. Duncan, traditionally, everything was backhauled to pairing points, to servers in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. We try to keep as much as possible now on the continent in order to cater for that growth. We try to build also a bigger resilient network. This is also why we are expanding our fiber highways with the East Coast to the West Coast if something goes wrong, but also to cater for the connection of the digital hubs. Today, there are 3 digital hubs in Africa, which sits in South Africa, in Nigeria, and in Kenya. Now, these highways are not connected over the land, so which we are doing as we speak, besides doing it over the sea. On top of that, we do think that there should be more digital hubs on the African continent in order to keep the content in Africa also and to have a better, let's say, resilience on our levels. And we do see also a lot of the content being created in Africa. So why would we bring it outside of the continent and back inside through a loop? So we try to drive a lot of these efficiencies as we speak. But all in all, there is still need to build even further capacity towards the other continents in the world. And we are certainly prepared for that and are thinking about it and building on that.
Is your focus purely on long distance type infrastructure? I mean, we've spoken about building fiber networks across Africa and subsea systems, but do you also deploy metro fiber? And have you built any data centers? Is that something that's in your roadmap?
Oh, very, very pertinent and good question, Duncan. So no, we do fiber. Fiber to the home is yet not in our key priorities, although we're going to pass a lot of buildings. We do metro, we do backhaul, we do long distance, we do short distance across the board. So all of that is part of Bayobab's remit. Our customers, just to give you a bit of a different perspective, our customers is everybody who has a license or who acts as a license operator. And to define that, it's very simple. So a local MNO has a license, so they are our customers. We're going to roll out fiber for them to the base stations, to the buildings, metro, long distance, backhaul. All of that is part of it. We are serving them, okay. We are serving their enterprise customers, and we are serving their retail customers. And everything where fiber is needed, we are, as long as the business case is there, willing to put in the ground. Now, acting like a licensed operator, you come into the spheres of the hyperscalers, like an Amazon, like a Microsoft, like a Meta, like a Google. They have so much capacity demand that we need to cater for that. So everything which is wholesale business sits within our remit. Everything which is enterprise business or consumer business sit with somebody else and we don't touch. So that gives a clear demarcation point of what we do and what we don't do on that level.
Just lastly then, Fred, do you have, you're looking forward over the next few years, are you going to grow entirely organically, or are you also looking at strategic acquisitions if they were to crop up? Would you look at opportunities to buy infrastructure from other providers?
We grew so far mainly organically. We had a spectacular growth, and we continue that growth as we speak. So there is a big demand from our internal and external customers, so we'll continue that journey. We did a tactical local acquisition also within the group already in Kenya. So that helped us also in driving our business in Kenya, where we don't have a mobile operator. We are looking at all opportunities which make sense for us in order to aggressively roll out our infrastructure. But we are mainly here to serve and to delight our customers all over Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is our focus. And yes, so we do think consolidation of certain parameters within that market could make sense. And yes, I mean, we're here to partner. We're here to drive that business in order to delight our customers wherever they are in Africa, and also enable everybody outside of Africa to be the one-stop shop in order to help them in doing business with us in Africa.
I know you said you've been self-funded since your start. Is there any talk at all about a potential IPO of this business at some point? Is that something that's on the cards?
Well, you should ask that to my shareholders, Duncan. So that
okay,
that's
when we get Ralph on the show, Ralph and Peter on the show.
I think that's a question for Ralph and his board. But I mean, look, I mean, we are always very keen and to add value not only to our customers but also to our shareholders, and on all levels. I think we are very laser focused in what we are doing. I'm very proud of the team and what they've achieved so far. We're a group of company now. We're expanding in territories which are uncharted in certain cases. You're going to hear a lot about us in the coming weeks and months on various game-changing parameters on the continent. So I think we're well set into that ecosystem to make it grow. Let's put it that way.
Good stuff. Well, I look forward to seeing how this business develops in the coming years and some of the infrastructure that you're going to be building on the African continent. Frédéric Schepens is CEO of Bayobab. Thanks for sharing your insights with the TechCentral Show today.
Thank you, Duncan, for having us.